Amelia Guertin. I'm the COO of Bundler. Thank you so much for waking up early. Well, I feel like it's early to come see me today. So for those of you who don't know what Bundler is a data layer that is built on top of Arweave. And really what we're working towards is creating a trustless source of truth by enabling access to permanent censorship-resistant data storage by making it scalable, performant, and easy for everyone to use. So you can sign and pay in 14 different tokens. Before I joined Bundler, I was at Coinbase for about a year, and Snowflake, and Salesforce, and a bank. So I had a really fun time in Web 2. And yeah, excited to chat with you guys about how you can actually go to market with what you've built. So quick agenda for today. Really, we're going to be going through quite a few different things. So one, looking at some of the failed products due to lack of adoption. We're going to talk about getting intimate with some of your users and your marketplace. And then basically unbox a lot of the problems that they're experiencing right now and how you're essentially creating the solution for them. Then we're going to talk about how you're going to make an impact and actually create a plan. So really the goal for today is to help builders find your market fit and how you can ultimately go to market by executing a very specific strategy. Okay, so I'm not sure if anyone recognizes some of these products on the screen, but these all failed to launch. So innovative technologies, despite its coolness, have failed. So even the best things can become obsolete overnight, and it can happen to any size company. You'll see that Google's up there twice, and Google is obviously a very large company. So really, these companies actually failed to monetize the product that they had created and understand what their audience really wanted and lacked adoption. So that's even with their huge, massive user base, they were not able to get anyone to really care or use their products. So why is that? I think it's because they didn't spend some time getting to know their users and then really sort of differentiating themselves on why they should be ultimately used. And not to scare anyone, but this is even more difficult, especially if you're a startup. So we know that 75% of startups fail. This is even more significant for blockchain startups at 90%. And so with the fact that we're blazing new trails with decentralized system and creating new paradigms, we started focusing on some different things that sort of got us away from our foundations. Some things like the number of wallet addresses, how many participants we have in our network, how many Twitter followers we have, and the price of our token. But ultimately, that doesn't mean adoption. And I think we need to start paying attention to some other things that are important when it comes to, again, really understanding your users and knowing if they're going to be adopting you, as whether it's a product, so whether it's B2C or B2B. So let's talk about how we could start focusing on the right things and reconnecting with our users. So first off, let's get intimate. Who is your user? A lot of projects have told me that they are focused on builders. I don't know what that means. We need to get very specific and intimately understand who your users are. I'll tell you a little story about Bundler specifically. We had not a lot of clarity when I first started on who our users were. Again, we also said builders. But ultimately, we had two different products. One which was a very B2C focus, so it was an end consumer product. And then we had one that was very focused on back-end developers who were building decentralized applications that needed permanent data storage, essentially, which is what we initially offered. So we had two different focuses, which really wasn't sustainable for a 9-person team. And we actually decided to offload the B2C product to a different team so that we could really focus and get intimate with our back-end developers. And when I say get intimate, I mean understanding not only some of the technical pains that they're experiencing, but like how does that impact them from a psychological standpoint, right? Like what's really keeping them up at night, and where are they hanging out? That's the other thing too. So knowing the watering holes of where those back-end developers who are focused on decentralized data storage are hanging out, and I call them watering holes, is really important. And actually spending time with them is key to really understanding your users. So lessons learned from our experience: try not to split your time by having multiple different audiences, especially if your team is incredibly small. Try to focus on one audience, and again, getting to know them very intimately and spending time with them. So now that you know your audience, let's unlock Pandora's box. So we know the myth of Pandora's box to be this box that really created a lot of misery. And the fact of the matter is, if you're not understanding the underlying problem or creating a net new opportunity, I don't know really why anyone would care, because you're not making their life incrementally better. So for us, that we really focused on within the Arweave ecosystem is that Arweave had this ability to essentially promise permanent data storage that was censorship resistant, but it wasn't very easy to use, and it wasn't going to be performing to the state that a lot of people needed in order for it to be effective. So when we were unlocking what Pandora's box was, we really honed in on specifically the scalability, usability, and performance, and realized that that was going to be the problem that we were going to lead into. So when you're thinking about basically determining whether there's a problem or opportunity, I always like to ask these three questions. So what is the problem that you're solving for? How substantial is that problem? So it might be a small problem that no one really cares about, or it's a really big one that's really impacting their day-to-day. And then again, how much misery is that audience member or the audience that you're targeting really going through, both from a technical but then also psychological standpoint. So then there sort of comes a point where you need to decide whether you're going to play in the sandbox that currently exists, or are you going to blaze your new trail? And so what the heck does that mean? Basically, you can either decide to present a solution that's similar to a lot of competitors within the space, or you can create a brand new category. So if you want to build a new one, that is going to require quite a bit of education and onboarding. I think a really good example of this in the space is Celestia and Fuel with modular blockchains. And I don't know if anyone's familiar with them, but they basically continuously repeated this new concept of modular blockchains. And they basically blazed this new trail where they were the leaders within that space for a really long time. And they were setting the rules for their own game because they weren't playing in the same sandbox as a bunch of other people. So yeah, think about whether or not you want to create a new category that is going to require more education and communication, but it presents a really great opportunity if you could do it effectively by creating the new rules. One of the things that we are currently actually doing at Bundler is traditionally we've always played within the same category of data storage, but what we've realized recently is that we actually need to create our new category. So that's something that we're actively working on as a team and creating our own rules within the space. Some things that we are doing in order to create that new category is taking a look at our community and what they're saying about us and how they understand who we are. Also looking at the competition. If we're gonna create a new category, is there gonna be competition that exists? Probably not. And when we do create that new category, they're probably gonna try to play within that. So how do we quickly position ourselves in a strong way that is going to allow us to blaze that trail and really be the leader? Once you've determined essentially whether or not you are going to play in the same sandbox or blaze your new trail, I always like to call all heroes to talk about what they do and really communicate clearly what you do and why you solve those problems more effectively than anyone else in the space. So yeah, simple question. What is your project? Why does it matter? And what makes you truly different? When I say be really detailed and specific, I mean think about your audience. Think about the people who you spent a bunch of time getting to know and tie it back to what they care about. Because again, you could build something really special, but if the people who are ultimately going to be using it don't understand it or don't really care, then they might not be using it. So again, a core understanding of what your project's DNA is really, really key to be able to effectively communicate that to individuals who are ultimately going to be using it. And that's whether you're a B2B or B2C or B2B2C, it doesn't matter. You need to clearly communicate your value. Okay, impact, impact, impact. I love business value. We don't talk about it enough within the space, in my opinion. But why is this important now? So why should someone care in this moment? What is the driving force behind what's going to ultimately make your users' lives easier? And your lives can be easier in a number of different ways. So I put a couple of examples on the screen. So how is what you're building essentially saving time? How is it reducing costs? Increasing the number of users if they're adapt, for example, improving inefficiencies, or creating new market opportunities. So one of the things that we specifically hear a lot at Bundler from our builders is ultimately they're able to save a lot of time on back-end infrastructure by easily integrating our SDK with the dApps that they're building. And when I say a significant amount of time, I mean that they don't need to spend weeks. They actually reduce it to a couple of hours by just essentially using Bundler. And then when you also think about their end users and the experience that they're going through, they don't have to wait for any of their, say, NFTs that are being uploaded to Bundler. It's a near instant upload time, which when you're thinking about the user experience for those end users, that's really important for them because ultimately that's going to create a better experience for their users. So again, when you think about the overall impact, don't only think about your users, but also think about what they care about at the end of the day, which sometimes is not always what you care about. And because of that, because we reduced the complexities and created great experiences for their end users, that really justifies the premium that we have on top of uploading data storage to Arweave. So again, business value really helps, especially if you're charging for using your network to really justify why exactly you're charging that amount. All right, so now that you've heard all of this, where do we go from here? Anyone who is in this room, I'd always challenge you, whether you're a one-person team or a 20-person team, to stop building for a couple of days, lock yourself in a room, and go through a lot of the questions that I talked about today. So at the end, and if you want to actually have access to this, I'm happy to share it with everyone, but filling out a messaging and positioning, I call it a messaging house. You can call it whatever you want, but filling that out and getting really specific on a lot of the questions that I'd asked today, and knowing who your audience is, really defining what that challenge or opportunity that you're solving for is, clearly communicating what the solution that you're building for that problem, who you are, what makes you uniquely different from anyone else within the space, and who you should also determine what your mission and vision is, especially if you're going to be building out a project. So mission and vision, mission's what you're doing today, vision, what you strive for in the future. So this, to me, is like the Bible. It's what everyone in your team should really look at, read, understand. And when everyone asks what your project is, you're ultimately communicating the same thing over and over again. And then get feedback from your users too. This should be not a one and done doc. This should be something that you constantly iterate on and change, especially as the market changes. You want to continue to stay relevant, but always stay core to your mission and vision. There's a ton of really great examples of missions and visions. Ours at Bundler is, again, to be the data layer of the internet to create a trustless source of truth, to ultimately set humanity free. And the way that we're doing that is by creating an access layer to our Weave to be able to deliver permanent censorship-resistant data storage. So again, really thinking about what's going to continue to keep what you're building relevant within the space long term. And then again, always tying it back to what your audience and target market cares about. So short presentation today, but if you have any questions or if you want to have access to the messaging house, happy to share that with you guys. You can connect with me on Telegram, Twitter, or if you want to learn more about Bundler because you care about decentralized data storage, feel free to follow us on some of our socials. But I appreciate the time today, everyone, and have a happy conference.